when it comes to free, Netflix, great example. Netflix has stayed away from news. Do you know why?
Are they? Are they? Do they not want to alienate half their subscribers?
Yeah, one of their CEOs, because they had co-CEOs the last couple for the last few years, said that it was divisive.
Yeah, they clearly want to get both. They
Yeah.
want to play to the whole room. They
All right. All right.
and they still leave room for people like Chappelle
Yeah,
to
that's
say
precisely
whatever.
where I was going
And so
next.
comedians see that and go, oh, okay, in
Not
this
not
realm,
not just that. All right. So at the same time, they see comedians as sort of this other world over here where we're like, like we're gonna stand up for Chappelle when he says naughty things. We're gonna make this little playground for these folks. But news, on the other hand, I'm gonna not even
mm-hmm,
touch that stuff. That is
mm-hmm.
just um too much for us. At the
Whereas
same time, like, it's interesting. You have three thoughts in your head at the same time. You you want to not be divisive, yet you're gonna bring in comedians, and you're gonna keep news away because it is inherently, at least in its current form, divisive.
yeah, and whereas musicians, especially the established one, or even not so much, even people at sort of like a middling or to lower level are quick to eat their own and know that they will be eaten by their own, promoters and booking agents and other bands and management companies will wash their hands if they immediately catch the scent of something that's forbidden that you said.
Well,
Hence
that
why they're more fucking quiet. But that's okay. So I totally get your points that this is maybe
political,
more of a structural
social.
issue than in terms of like how the media landscape is constituted than just a cultural issue. But I do think if you compared like what boomers felt in like the late 60s for like the Doors and David Crosby, and they were looking to musicians, or even in the 80s in the anti-Reagan punk hardcore stuff.
I think you're mixing like two, like, because I could your Doors 60s early 70s argument is stronger than the 80s because that 80s stuff was not big.
It doesn't have to be big. I'm talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
its
it does.
cultural resonance.
It
I'm
does. In
talking
order,
about
in order,
okay. I'm talking
in
about
order
the
to like have this kind of conversation where it starts, where we're talking about big stars,
no.
and
I'm
then
not
you're
just
gonna
talking about big stars. I'm talking
well,
about the
well,
public's. Hold
then
on a
we're
second.
like, what are we
No,
doing?
no, no, no. Because the way political music was framed in the 80s and in the aftermath of like how that stuff is still talked about, and also the rise of rap music as a political revolution. Chuck D still talks about rap music as a revolutionary force. I agree with you. I laugh at that too. I'm with you about that. But
Yeah,
he's not the only one though.
I
Who
know, I know.
and here's also
They're wrong.
I I completely agree with you. That's sort of my point, right? Which is that rhetoric around music to me falls completely flat. It doesn't really serve that purpose, especially in a time where music artists are incentivized to all march in lockstep with whatever the the accepted pre-approved talking points of the day are. I cannot tell you how many press releases I get every week that say LGBTQ or queer, in the subject line. Queer
Hmm.
BIPOC is getting less. I guess that's getting phased out. I guess I don't know. Um, maybe I should try to get AI to like analyze all my inbox for the last 20 years and see the subjects and see
Yeah,
if
you should do an in-depth post on that. That would do very, very well.
I'm just curious, like what,
Yeah.
to somehow scan through all that content because I know for a fact that so many publicists are putting that front and center, as if that makes these musicians interesting, and it makes them more homogenous.
Um,
Comedy has more variation, I think, now currently. I don't know whose point
yeah,
that backs up, but I'm just saying that's
yeah. There's an interesting point there. You know, like I've worked in. For those who don't know, I've worked in journalism, communications, and marketing since. Well, my first job was in radio, so we're talking '06. It's before I met you, and then when I met you, I was in TV. Um, um, and now all the way up to government communications. And when I hear you describe what you just described, I wonder how much of that is the artist and how much of that is the apparatus trying to promote the artist.
Can I get it? Can I guess?
It sounds way more like the apparatus promoting the artist than the artist themselves.
Do you want to know what I think?
Yeah.
I think it's both. I think there is such a uniformity of groupthink in the music world in general. And I think musicians will tend to tread closest to wherever they think is going to get them attention and approval. And I don't think that's any different. I can't say that that's different than comics. I just know I've just been around more musicians and seen how the name of the game is to get the audience to love you, right? I think
I'm not sure that's the name of the game.
I think if we're going to make generalizations, I'm just throwing this out there. I don't have any.
It should be the name of the game. I don't think that's it.
But if we're going to talk about personality types in music versus comedy, again, I have nothing to base this on. Maybe I'll just pose this as a question. Does music attract more people who are willing to not people please, but do what it takes to get adulation, versus does comedy attract people who are more like, hey, I'm going to give you something to think about that kind of, I'm going to challenge you a little bit more, even though I still want you to laugh with me.
Yeah, I think your description holds. I think that comedians are all right. You can be a highly successful comic today, and historically, without the system, giving you a spot.
Right. That's less so in music.
Yeah, you can be successful in music that way. It's like you said, it's less so.
And to prove your point, which I initially balked at, that he's like, well, this is a way to like generate an audience and make money and generate income. All the comics I'm talking about who are really, really serious, they promote their shows they promote their comedy appearances, their comedy gigs on their shows. They're like, oh, we're going to be in Portland and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.